every Saturday when a family friend called it in, and it went like to national level news like really quickly, which brought a lot of attention to Bloomington, which is like fairly small town and mostly just a college town. So that attention was unwanted, and it brought attention to the four guys who had last seen Lauren alive. So Rossman and Rosenbaum immediately lawyered up, which I don't know, is kind of weird, but I guess whatever. But they didn't talk to police after they lawyered up. And then Blesnik and Ferber went back to Michigan without talking to Bloomington police as well. So they're all just not going to say anything. And then also Wolf's parents flew in from Long Island to help with the search, and Wolf and his dad barged unannounced into Rossman's townhouse to confront him. And apparently Beth had to break them up and force the Wolfs to leave. So that's not good.
No.
But Jesse Wolf left a few days after the searches started with his parents. So also apparently only one of her friends had given any tips to the police. So like her parents were really disappointed in her friend group because all these guys immediately get lawyers, and then like Jesse leaves with his parents after a couple days, and then none of her other friends have any tips or anything besides one. So it's kind of sad. But the police had daily briefings, and on the 12th day, they asked for information on the driver of a white truck. The truck was a four-door Chevy Silverado or Colorado and had ran a stop sign around the time Lauren went missing, and was also seen by cameras circling a block near what would have been her walking route back home. And the truck had been caught on camera at 4:14 a.m. and again at 4:24 a.m. And in the surveillance photo, you could see a black and white blob in the bed of the truck that like could look like a person. So there's a picture for you, but it really is just like a blob. Like,
Right. But I could see. I mean, it could literally be anything, like a tarp or something, but
yeah. But you can kind of see like maybe someone like holding their knees or something and hair.
yeah.
But apparently the surveillance photos times were labeled incorrectly, and the truck wasn't there at the same time as Lauren would have been. So after this mishap by the police, they scaled back the daily press conferences to 3 times a week. And the police searched a transit station for garbage as well as the landfill just south of Terre Haute. But they hadn't been able to get a warrant quickly enough for the trash to like halt. So by the time they got there, it had been 2 months. So it was like, you're literally not going to find anything after 2 months of trash being dumped there. Because they were thinking like, okay, someone maybe killed her and dumped her in a dumpster. But 2 months later, how are you going to find anything?
Right. Well, maybe. I mean, sometimes they don't clean the dumpsters out, so you might find like DNA in the bottom of the dumpster.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. They couldn't really find anything. And I mean, they couldn't search the whole like landfill either because it's just so massive. And since they didn't halt it, like trucks just kind of dump wherever in the landfill. Like there's not a designated spot that's like just Bloomington trash. So it was really hard to look.
Yeah.
And also they brought in like cadaver dogs, but since there's like rotted meat and food and stuff, in the trash, like they couldn't sniff out anything either. Also, the construction site she walked by on her way home, like, had huge holes that were, like, filled in the next morning. So some people thought, like, maybe she fell in there and the holes were filled without them somehow seeing a woman in the hole. But if that happened, I mean, you'll never know because they're all filled in already. So, Elliot Lewis owned several businesses in Bloomington, and he said a week before her disappearance, he saw Lauren sitting on the doorstep of Rosenbaum's townhouse and appeared to be waiting for someone. And also, a friend said that they witnessed Rosenbaum and Lauren kissing at the Indy 500. So, like, there's speculation that maybe they were developing a relationship in secret, but that's just speculation. But Lewis did give that tip to police, as well as a list of people who said they might have seen her that night. And 2 days later, he followed up with his list of people who were willing to speak to the cops. and they hadn't been contacted yet by Bloomington Police Department, which their response was that they have a lot of leads, so it's going to take time. But, like, wouldn't you want to talk to people that want to talk to you? Like, some people are saying the police really did not do a good job on this case and, like, dropped the ball, but... the Spieers left Bloomington back to New York in September, and they ended up hiring a private investigator, Bo Dietl, and they flew back to Bloomington with his team, but the detectives clashed with the Bloomington Police Department, and the BPD basically said they weren't really welcome there, so they investigated on their own, which is also, like, sad that they can't work together. But I guess these people are from New York. It was like small town Indiana, and then the New York bigwigs come in, and like just the culture clash, I guess. But over that summer, a blog started called Jay Rosenbaum Needs to Talk, and he got a lot of flack from people on campus that he was not cooperating with the police and that he should have walked her home. Also, like, his story kept changing still as the time was going on. Like, he at one point said, as part of his story for that night, that Lauren kept picking up his iPod to use, like, as if it were a phone. And he even said at some point that maybe Lauren had taken it. But when someone pointed out to him, like, oh, that could be used to track her then and we could find her, and then he, like, walked that part of the story back and saying, oh, no, she didn't take it then. So that's, like, weird. Um, Also, like, he still was confused if he had seen Lauren walk out the front door or if he watched her leave from his second floor balcony. And he also claimed his friend Blesnick was asleep when Mike Beth brought Lauren over to his townhouse, but Mike Beth said Blesnick was awake and he saw Lauren there. And then Rosenbaum did eventually do a lie detector test and he passed, but the test was conducted by his lawyers since he wouldn't let the investigators conduct it. And also, lie detector tests aren't, like, great anyway, so I don't know if that really proves anything, but... But by the fall school year, people were moving on, and the family had talked to Rosenbaum, Wolf, and Beth by then, but Rossman was refusing to talk to them. And the private detectives arranged to meet with Wolf in December before his graduation, but the day before they were supposed to meet, he abruptly left town and drove back to New York. So that's weird, too, that he avoided talking to them. And he didn't make any arrangements to pay the rest of his rent, which was 6 months more for rent. And he also left many personal belongings behind, including some things that seemed like it was Lauren's. So that's very strange behavior. He also had 2 paper documents. One was an article titled The Killing of Kristen, which was the story about Kristen Lardner, who was murdered by her abusive boyfriend in 1992 in Boston. Yeah, like, that's concerning. And then the other document was a notebook page with an article, like, written down, which was titled The Stalking of Kristen, The Law Made It Easy for My Daughter's Killer. It's like, why is he interested in that? I don't know. But in March 2012, Rosenbaum agreed to meet with the private investigators, and he was consistent in his story this time, except he said he was with Rossman and Lauren at Kilroy's that night, which that was never said before. But he said Rossman had asked him to keep an eye on Lauren when he went to the bathroom. So another detail that's different from his other tellings. So
Right.
it's almost like every time he talks about it, something is different. But he was also at this point certain that he was on his balcony instead of the front door to watch her, and he was more certain that a shadowy figure did approach her, but he did nothing about that. So... and Lauren had a few missed texts and one call from an unknown number around the 24 hours of her disappearance, which 2 years after her disappearance, they found through the private investigators to be a friend, Annie, from school. And the Bloomington police, like, had never asked Annie any questions since she had messaged her that night she disappeared. And no one had looked into who this unknown number was, like, within the police. So this made the parents feel as if the police like weren't really looking into everything and doing everything they could. I mean, that's concerning.
Mm-hmm.
Also, at the 2-year mark, they filed a lawsuit against the three last men known to see her alive: Jay, Rosenbaum, Corey, Rossman, and Mike Beth. And the idea with this was to force them to share more information through the court system, because they'd have to disclose like their text messages, phone calls, like have sworn testimony, stuff like that. And the lawsuit accused the three friends of contributing to Lauren's presumed death. And apparently if they didn't like do this by the 2-year anniversary, they'd lose like certain legal rights. So they felt like they had to do this lawsuit kind of as like a last Hail Mary to get more information.
Mm-hmm.
So the lawsuit was filed in Monroe County and began on March 31st, 2013, and it rested on 3 legal arguments, which the first one was negligence resulting in the disappearance, death, or injury of an adult child. The second one was negligence per se, which is argued that because Lauren was severely intoxicated, the defendants owed her a duty of care and failed to meet that standard by letting her walk home alone. And the third one was called a dram shot argument, which is usually applied to bars that overserve customers, but I guess in Indiana it can also be applied to people who furnish others with alcoholic drinks, which the Spieers claim these 3 young men did. Um, so yeah, this was definitely a Hail Mary for the family because they didn't have much evidence to base it on, with like the boys luring up so quickly. So they really needed a judge to allow them to go to discovery, so the boys would be forced to hand over like all evidence pertaining to that night. And if they truly were not involved, it would also clear their name like once and for all. But the defense lawyers dismissed the lawsuit as a fishing expedition, which, I mean, it definitely was, because they're trying to get any information.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was a catch-22 because, like, without proof of injury or death, there was no legal basis for the lawsuit. But without the lawsuit, they wouldn't get any evidence to prove her injury or death. But another issue with this was the police investigation was still open, so anything the men shared in a civil case could be used in the criminal case against them. So they made it clear in their filings that they would invoke the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent if pressed to speak directly to the events of that night to avoid potentially incriminating themselves. I don't know, that seems weird to me too, but the case against Mike Beth was dropped early on because he like wasn't with Lauren at the bars, and there was no evidence he had given her any alcohol like in their townhouse. But the case against Rossman and Rosenbaum was dismissed months later due to lack of evidence for the legal basis of the lawsuit. And that also stopped their appeal too, so they never got more information. But there's lots of theories on what happened to her. So the number one theory is she was taken by a stranger. And there was a witness that said they saw someone who looked like Lauren walking down the street at 4 a.m. around the same area Lauren would have been, and a teal Dodge truck rolled up and grabbed the woman off the street. And the witness didn't get a license plate, so it was kind of a dead-end tip. But another witness had said she had heard screaming around 4 a.m. in the area Lauren would have been as well. But also, couldn't they find, like, the surveillance for that area if they know this was that time?
Maybe there just wasn't a lot of surveillance. I mean,
Yeah,
I feel like cameras are only now becoming so
right.
relevant or like common.
Yeah, I just wonder because they had that white truck, so why couldn't you look for this teal truck?
Right.
But maybe, yeah, in the area that they said, maybe there wasn't really surveillance there, I guess. Another theory is that it was her boyfriend, Jesse Wolf, and apparently on June 14th, so that's, what, like 9 days later, he posted on Facebook, "Back in the Facebook relationship, I love you so much, baby, can't stop thinking about you." Like, with a new girl. But it was deleted the next day. Yeah.
Wait. Oh my god.
Right. But he did delete it the next day, so I don't know. But that's crazy. 9 days later. But later in the fall, he